Hey, it's Chris Bleck. This week's conversation is with Matt Luongo, who's the lead developer of tBTC, a project that allows you to bridge your Bitcoin from the Bitcoin blockchain to the Ethereum blockchain. In reality, what it does is it lets you lock your Bitcoin in a wallet on the Bitcoin blockchain, and then it creates a token for you on the Ethereum blockchain that represents that Bitcoin. It's a cool project, a useful project. Matt is a great guy to talk to in this space because he's very upfront, very respectful, very open about the good and the bad about the DeFi on the Ethereum blockchain. You're going to enjoy this conversation. At the end of the conversation, we also get into tBTC and recent issues it's been having, a bug that it experienced, the implications of that, and difficult choices that Matt and the team had to make about the future of the project. So listen to the whole thing. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Before we get into it, I want to talk to you quickly about Bitrefill and how you can use it to stay private with your mobile phone. And it's really just a few easy steps. Go to bitrefill.com, click on eSIMs, choose the country that you're in or the country that you're going to, choose the plan. I'm going to choose 5 gigs, 30 days, add to the cart, check out. When you get here, you might need to at some point create an account, create an email and password. No first name, no last name, no phone number, nothing like that. It's just your email that this is associated with. Enter promo code Chris Bleck at this stage. You're going to get 5% back in Bitcoin rewards. Chris Bleck, no space. Click on the Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever you want to pay with. Click through to whatever wallet you're using and you're going to get a QR code. You pay the bill, you get the eSIM. You can use the eSIM anywhere in the world, whatever you chose. And like I said, it's only associated with the email address that you used. You might want to use a VPN for added security. Give it a try. Bitrefill.com, promo code Chris Bleck. Okay, we've got Matt Luongo, who is a busy man, and I appreciate him making time. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris.
Can you give the quick rundown? Because you're involved. You always have your hands in a lot of stuff, and I don't want to mess up your intro.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the founder of Thesis, which is a crypto venture studio, and so that means we start a lot of projects, which is why I'm always busy. And that means Fold, which is a Bitcoin-backed rewards card. tBTC, which I imagine we'll talk about a bit today here. We were involved with, let's see, Saddle, Tahoe, which is a wallet going after MetaMask. And then a bunch of new stuff. One of them is called Embody, which is an encrypted period tracker. Another one's called Etcher, which is an ordinals play. So yeah, we do a little bit of everything.
Well, we've spoken before a few times, and you're one of the people, I'll preface the conversation with this, you're one of the people in this space that I respect highly and who's always forthcoming and honest and willing to talk about just about anything. And tBTC obviously is the big, probably the highest profile thing you're working on right now. And we'll get to that. I think we should talk about it
Sure.
within the hour that we've allotted here. But the reason that we decided to chat today was about some tweets. And let me just give some context, because I think that this is such an important topic, and we never get a chance as a community to talk about it mostly because developers are so busy, right? You had to stop developing, stop talking about developing, stop building, stop working on security for this hour to be able to talk about this, right? Which is probably annoying as hell. So you're like, why do I have to make time to talk about this when I could be building? I get it. I get that. You don't have to say yes or no. I get it.
I'm into it. But yeah, no, most people aren't. Yeah, I'll admit.
Right. So the topic is, do non-technical, I'll call them, even though it's kind of a vague term.
I hate that term.
But do non-technical people, and I consider myself in that category, okay?
Sure.
And that doesn't mean tech illiterate. It means non-developers, non-builders as far as tech goes. Do they have a right to have opinions in this space that carry equal weight to those of developers? All right. So before we get into it, let me give the context to the tweets. So I retweeted somebody who was basically picking on me um, for criticizing without ever pushing code myself, right? As far as I've pushed code, but as far as in the context of crypto and building this kind of tech. So what I said was, every single day, it's like having a politician saying you can't have an opinion if you've never held office. And I said, you do not have to be a developer to have a valid opinion on the direction of the crypto space. Your opinions don't become invalid just because you can't code. Okay, and I've got a lot more thoughts than that, but that's what I wrote. And then, Matt, you replied with this. Agreed, except instead of a politician and a citizen talking about a shared interest in their country, it's a civil engineer and a motorist talking about their shared interest in an interstate bridge. Your opinions are valid, but if you learn a tiny bit more about engineering, you'll not only have valid opinions, you'll get to spank anyone who BS's and uses, quote, it's very complicated, or, quote, engineering as an excuse. There shouldn't be a wizard behind the curtain or above reproach. That means tearing down the curtain, but it also means learning a little magic. So the way you position that is very kind, I see what you're saying. Before I go further, does that accurately do you want to flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah,
what you're thinking there?
Yeah, let me give you a little bit more, my take on the history too. So the first time I really ran, obviously I've run to this my whole career as a person with an engineering background who works a lot of different. And it's very easy for specialists to trample on, really just anyone, right? Say, oh, this is too complicated, or this is too this, or this is too that. And sometimes they're completely right. And sometimes they are full of shit. And, and it's like, your, computer science degree, or, whatever you did since you were 12 in your mom's basement. Well, I guess that could be anything. But, that doesn't justify not explaining yourself. And in some systems, sure. If you live in a social system where it's we will only speak to each other in binary or something, and you want to exclude anyone, okay, sure. But for the most part, that's not how the world works, right? We have lots of people of lots of different walks of life. And so where I really saw this come to a head, where I think I learned a lot about it, was with the block size debate in Bitcoin. Because you had this sort of populist, let us use our block space, tear it down, why do the core devs decide kind of movement. But then it also turned into that populist side ended up going corporatist. And then the people actually switched to side of the core devs, because they were like, oh, well, if there are a bunch of companies over here, it was way more complicated than this. But, if there are a bunch of companies over here on Segwit 2x, I'm starting to feel a little uncomfortable about this. Maybe this is the wrong place for us. And all of the technical nuance and everything else really got beaten out of that discussion, and it became politicking. And, the way Bitcoin works, if someone can't make a decision, just nothing changes. Everything grinds to a halt. And that's why I like it so much, right? But that also makes it really, really hard to make changes. And it makes it easy for someone, if you want to make a change and you're not popular with whoever's currently well-known on the developer side, it does get political. And so you'll have someone who feels like Jeremy Rubin or someone who's being completely legitimate and good faith, and their stuff gets torn down. And I don't need to get into covenants or anything like that. It's just, there's this trade-off. And anyway, I just feel like I worked with a lot of the people during that, and it's everyone was wrong, right? Okay, cool. Small blocks are good. Small blocks are good for Bitcoin. Here's a lot of reasons. But you should be able to convince anyone who is a participant on the network why that is. Similarly, if you want to do something fancy and new, you should be able to convince anyone. So yeah, I guess I just saw a lot of polemic and a lot of fake engineering on both sides. And since then, that kind of, when people just say something's very complicated or they can't explain it, I usually think that means either they don't understand it or it's in their interests not to explain it.
Yeah. I find that too. I've gotten that a lot myself, having criticized a lot of projects in the space. I guess from my point of view, there's a little bit of um, I almost look at it as philosophy almost, and there's a major thought process behind crypto that almost transcends the tech, right? Like as far as when you think about Bitcoin, you think about why people respect Bitcoin, why people appreciate it and use it and almost worship it sometimes. Yes, it's about the tech, but even more than that, it's about what the tech enables, right? So, and I always, my thing I like to say is that I think puts it in perspective is that Bitcoin was not a technological revolution as much as it was a philosophical revolution, right? Because for the first time, it gave us the ability to think about technology in a very specific way, and we know that, we know that a lot of the tech that makes Bitcoin happen already had existed, right? There was some stuff that it was innovative, but a lot of it, so it just had to be put together in a specific way to make the blockchain revolution occur. And it's that philosophy and that thought process that brought all of us here, whether or not we know how to code, right?
Yep.
So now we're in a position of wanting to grow adoption and wanting the world to adopt this technology. And we all know that the world is mostly comprised of non-programmers, right? And probably the majority of the world, we could say, is tech illiterate as far as how stuff works. You use your iPhone, no idea how it works. You use your computer, no idea how it works.
Like
TV,
it's more and more
everything.
difficult to know every year because people keep studying these abstractions. Yeah.
Right. So from my point of view, I'm thinking about we're going to quickly reach the point where people's lives depend on this technology, kind of the way it does with banking or with, plumbing, like your water that comes into your house, right? Like you don't know how it gets there. You just know you want clean water, and you know you have a right to clean water, and you know that somebody needs to monitor it, and you know somebody needs. So you don't need to be a plumbing expert to know that you need clean water, right? And for your example too, like you said, it's like a civil engineer versus the motorist talking about a bridge. The motorist knows they want a safe bridge. They want to be able to get across the bridge. They want the bridge to be open. They don't know how to build the bridge.
Yep.
So from my point of view, I feel like that's where I come from. Like I come from that perspective. And I think it's a good analogy, the motorist versus the civil engineer. But I don't think that makes the motorist's feedback any less valid.
Totally.
Do you?
No, I agree. I mean, but I think you can imagine that conversation, right? What is safe? And I think that's where it starts getting like, well, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by this? And I mean, some of those answers are quote unquote technical, and I hate that dichotomy. But like some of those, you know, are closer to like engineering principles. Some of those are common sense. And I'm just a firm believer that if you're asking someone to trust work that you've done, you should be able to explain it where they are. What I like about the bridge example, I tried to make as many. There are some like funny things that are kind of off about that, right? So one is like, well, do you have to go over this bridge? So when you're talking about a politician in your country, they're elected. We are under the tyranny of the political class, right? So so there's all sorts of things about what's right and what's wrong and ethics here that I think are interesting. But you're talking about this bridge. I mean, especially if you can imagine there were a couple and you could choose, it becomes a little bit more apparent. Like, why do I believe this person? You know, was there an accreditation process? Is there an outside third party that audits bridge designs? Are there, do you have to like get a shiny badge and a diploma to be a civil engineer? And then I think there's also, we've seen that, I mean, I'm in Atlanta and I've seen that part of Spaghetti Junction, which is a huge amalgam of bridges, a little bit, not too far from where I am right now. There was a fire and part of a bridge was damaged beyond use. And I think some people would say, now your bridge really should be okay if there's a small fire under it. And I think that that's something that anyone common sense could have thought about, but it was outside the engineering parameters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess moving to like kind of the second part of my point, though, of course your opinion's valid. And I think that what's cool about crypto is we can all vote with our feet, and exit. At least that's my hope. That's why I'm building in this space. But the other part is there's not an accreditation process. So there's no reason to believe anything that anyone tells you in this space. Other than the normal human reasons, this person's been around a long time, or I liked them on podcasts. I don't know, like and so that's why, when I said learn a little magic, it's like, usually there's something to it. If you feel abused by a group of people, or like people are tugging your chain, they probably are. And I've seen devs do it across the space. But you have to learn just enough to know to call bullshit, because otherwise it just becomes pure populism, right? Which I think.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
I think I do know enough to be able to call.
Yeah, I'm not. And by the way, I'm not
BS.
challenging.
Okay, because I want to talk about, because for me, the best example of all this is me.
Yeah.
And so from my perspective, I encourage transparency, obviously, and I have my own standards for what I believe is decentralized enough for myself, and that's what I share, right? And so, for instance, if I go out there and I explain to people this fact about Chainlink's multisig, right? Chainlink has a multisig. It's 4 of 9, whatever it is. It could be used to, blah, blah, blah. All I have to say is that totally factual stuff.
Yeah.
In my opinion, not documented very well. In my opinion, not explained at all by the projects that are using Chainlink. But the pushback that I get is, I'm not a security expert like Sergey. I'm not a developer. I don't know what I'm talking about. So therefore, my opinion is invalid, and nobody should listen to me. Nobody should listen to what I'm saying. I'm saying facts.
Yep.
Okay. And then the pushback is people should not listen to it. And it's not just the token holder losers on Twitter. This is coming from like developers in the space. This is coming from other people who should know better. And it's not just Chainlink either. I've gotten the same pushback. I've gotten that kind of message back from developers that are working on layer 2 projects like Optimism. I will go out.
You don't get it. I bet you that in the Bitcoin community, this doesn't happen quite the same.
Well, Bitcoin community doesn't have many problems like this. I do think I have gotten it when I talk about mining, and when I talk about centralization there, and when I've asked about, there's certain things where it does touch a nerve. That's when it happens, when you touch a nerve, and that's when I know I'm on the right track. But do you think, and going back to what I was saying before, we expect the world to use this tech.
Yep.
And it seems like there's a lot of people that want to create this developer class that knows more than anybody else. But the message I'm getting from you is that you don't believe that should exist. But we can never expect like a lawmaker to be at like a dev's level of understanding.
Yeah. I guess how I feel is like, look, if we all live on chain, and magic is possible on chain if you learn certain incantations, and my whole life worth, like my savings are there, like I'm probably gonna learn a little, right? Just because I don't want to be subject
as like a non-technical person you're talking about.
Totally. Okay. So for example, one of my I didn't ask her about this first, so I won't talk too hard, but someone that I've worked closely with over the years, 6-7 years, isn't a developer. She has a marketing background, and I would put her up against any on-chain analyst I've seen on Twitter in terms of tracking down what's really going on digging into Etherscan, called in, doing some weird shit. And it's just because she decided that she wanted to make money in DeFi. And that quickly turned into, she has no formal training. As far as I know, she's never written any Solidity or anything like that. But it doesn't matter because she was so interested in making sure that she was safe that she kind of picked up the skills. But, I mean, there's a lot else to what you're saying here, right? So there's like if you want to be self-sovereign, you got to learn. But there's also a bunch of people are taking advantage of the fact that they're not being straight about how their system works. And it doesn't take a degree to understand what 4 of 9 means. It means less than the majority of people are needed, or keys, not even people, right? That's a separate discussion, but less than a majority of keys are needed to do whatever this thing has the power to do. And I think that's very straightforward. And I think that there's like a real DIY, like punk ethos to crypto. And when people say like, trust the devs, it's a huge eye roll moment for me, because like, why are we here? We're just moving from one trusted system to another. And I mean, I guess at some scale, eventually people aren't going to do any of their own diligence anymore, but I don't think we're there yet. So I think shitting on someone because they want to like actually verify seems pretty counter to our ethos.
Yeah, well, and there's plenty of people like that who are around on Twitter and elsewhere, who are trying to share thoughts and who are not developers like myself. The people I'm talking about, though, is the majority. And the majority of people that use this tech don't do that level of research. Yep. And they're not encouraged to do that level of research by the ones who are building the tech. So they're coming in, and these are the people who will follow me and be shocked about, the multi-sig here or the voting centralization here. They're the ones who come in with the expectation of Bitcoin level decentralization into like DeFi on Ethereum and don't see it. So as adoption grows, that's the segment that's going to grow. The segment that's going to grow is not the segment like us tech savvy people who
Yep.
know what's going on. It's going to be the group that like my sister, or my mom or something, who don't understand the tech, but know that, okay, now I've got to use it. Now I've got to use this. I'm probably going to use it through a front end that abstracts away everything that's difficult, doesn't explain the fact that it's all relying on Chainlink,
Yep.
doesn't explain the fact that there's a DAO that can totally nuke everything. Those are the people who I'm worried about. And those people have proven over and over and over to us that they don't care, and they're never going to care.
Yeah.
Right. But they deserve it. Just because they don't care doesn't mean they don't deserve to know. That's my point.
Yeah.
Right?
I hear that. I mean, but then you look at answers, right? And this is where, like, regulatory regimes, like, this is why they exist. And that is not me saying, like, for me, the way that I feel about a lot of that is like, live by the sword, die by the sword, right? Like, that is not how I want our space to be governed. But if we don't find our own path, that's what's going to happen de facto, right? It's like they'll just get closer and closer and closer because we're not adults and we're not doing it ourselves. So yeah, and I mean, look, I'm a sinner here too, and I can talk about all the reasons, right? This has been difficult. So when you and I first talked about tBTC v2 when it released, I said, look, here are all the things. Just ask me, I'll tell you. Here are all the things that need fixing. And I'm looking around and I'm still not. I'm like, oh man, is this list on the site? Like, it's in some GitHub. I mean, it's all public. It's in a GitHub, and there's like an issue that's tracking other issues, and you can see it all. But like, do people understand like the gravity and the and I think earlier when I said, I bet you don't get a lot of this in Bitcoin. Obviously, part of the reason you don't get a lot of this in Bitcoin is because people have fewer bags. You have your Bitcoin bag, and that's it on the Bitcoin side. But I think the other reason is when I first started doing work in Ethereum, I was shocked at how everyone would use the present tense for the future. Like, it's the most egregious over marketing I had ever seen, especially 2017, early 2018, where people would say, X is a decentralized this. And what they mean is, in 12 to 18 months, if everything goes well, and we didn't get so rich that we left the project. This project could be, maybe, there's like all these qualifiers. And then, and I think a little bit of that is probably just, maybe that's just what marketing is. But I had never experienced that, and I'd been doing tech startups before crypto.
That is marketing, and it's in every other type of tech. That's what you would expect, right? You would expect, and my background is in marketing. Like I was a marketing director, growth guy, for many years before ever getting into crypto. And, that's the way you would market something. And that's, if you hire a marketing person, that's what they're going to do. They're going to try to use catchphrases and buzzwords and this and that and the other thing. But the difference here with this tech is the finality. That's what I like to go straight to. What's the problem? The problem is the finality. None of this would matter if you weren't dealing with irreversible transactions that could drain your life savings if you're not careful, right? And so that's the big difference between this and every other kind of technology. So it necessitates a higher level of integrity and honesty and transparency from the people who are building it. From that's not just the devs; it's the entire team. It's the marketing, it's the growth, it's the social media, it's the public relations, everybody.
But what we need to do as participants in the space, like separate from like builder or pundit or growth person or marketer or whatever, is actually give plaudits to projects that are doing that, because it's pretty uncommon that a project is just like overwhelmingly honest. You're like, oh yeah, more of this, and they rush in, right? No, people are like, oh, this says absolutely nothing, but like Andre posted it, so I'm gonna ape. And I think that there's a real skewed incentive, especially if your time horizon in the space is 1 or 2 years, and then you want to be rich and exit, versus someone who wants to be around for 2 decades. So I think I don't know. I don't have an answer necessarily to all these issues. Like, I know there needs to be more self-regulation. I know that we as users need to demand more. I think there probably need to be some standards. I won't go too into it, but we launched an auditing arm recently at Thesis, and part of what we'll be pushing for is standards for audits. And I hope that just like legibility and human readability are a big part of that. I won't speak for the team. They have their own plans, but right now, if you look at an audit report, it means next to nothing for most people. I have been through at least maybe 10 audits at this point. And when I go through an auditing report, I still don't know that it means that much. So there's a lot of missing pieces.
Most people don't read them, by the way.
They'll look at a page and see if there was one, which is like.
And most users will never know it exists. Yeah. There's been projects that have raised or gotten to millions, maybe tens of millions, or maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in TVL with audit reports that specifically say, high severity stuff, or like the owner can drain all funds, stuff like that. It's right there. Like, it's happened. Yeah. And people have no idea. It could be linked from the homepage. No idea.
Yep.
No idea. There's been projects, but on the flip side, some of it's so obvious. Like, I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there was a project called DeFi Money Market. Do you remember that one?
I do.
They launched a project, a DeFi project, where they, what was it now? They had car loans. They were making car loans. So people would bring their used car to this company, put up their title, get a loan, right? And then you were lending the money to this company to give the loans. And the collateral are the car titles. So the yield you're earning is from the person paying their loan. So my question the whole time was, how can we verify that these car loans actually exist, that they're real, that, they're obviously not on chain because we don't have that kind of technology. Common sense would dictate to any person that there is a massive level of trust here that you're having to put in these people. And odds are this is some kind of a scam, which I forget how I know it ended with them not existing anymore, but I don't know if it was a scam or not. I forgot. But
I mean, there
bottom
have
line
been so
is,
many of these that it's hard to track. Like at this point, I'm just like,
yeah.
just look at the wrecked leaderboard because it's so hard to track up all the stories. But yeah, I mean,
well, my point with that one was that people still put money into it.
Yeah.
So it's like, even when it's totally obvious that it's a total probable scam,
Yeah.
people still put money in. So it almost like, that's the hard part. It's like, I want to push for I would like to see a pop-up on every DeFi front end that explains exactly how you can lose your money. You have to acknowledge it before you continue. But I'm not sure that would stop a lot of people from doing what they're doing.
If they thought they were going to make a buck, they'd click right through it.
Right.
And I'll tell you, I mean, I'm not like prepared to like pull it all up, but we've done some pretty intense like user education efforts on some of the projects we work on. And you'd be shocked at how you're like, wait, you took a fee. Yeah, it was right here. Here, it's explained in the interface, and you had to click acknowledge. There are 2 spots. No, but I want that back. What? How? Like, we can't. What do you mean? Like, and I think, I like to think of our space as like, how can we help people help themselves? So a lot of tech is about how can we help someone big be more efficient. That's what a lot of AI is about. That's what a lot of these things are like. How can we fish these data lakes? How can we make money off size and make more than our competitors? And what I like about crypto at its very, very best is that your job as dev in the space is to help people help themselves. So, when you go to sign a transaction, it should be explained to you in as plain English as is possible. When you go to use a dApp, you need to actually know what you're doing, and it needs to tell you like what are you actually doing. But it's like, well, if we can't trust the dApps to do this, all I see standards throughout the community that we can like FINRA style, that we can start kind of self-regulation pushing, and then I also see like products like wallets actually have an opportunity to be antagonistic, right? So instead of just being like, yeah, sure, we'll sign whatever, be like, actually, do you know how DeFi Moneymaker works? And like maybe give you like a little extra opportunity. But at the end of the day, I mean, I don't want to say people want to lose money, but it certainly feels that way in a bull market. It's like, do you want to just give your money away? Because I think people are the FOMO gets so high that common sense just goes right out the window.
Yeah, we see that a lot, and it's those people, the people who know better but do it anyway, that I get the most nervous about, because they're the first ones to call in the regulators, right? Or they cry to their congressperson. They're the people who create the problems that we have to deal with, with regards to privacy, with regards to a lot of this stuff. So, that's going back to what I was saying before about, I think every website should have a warning. I'm with you in that. I think that people, I don't want government regulation, right? I am anti, getting government involved, because government just decides stuff and then that's it. I think that people should have access to the information they need in order to create their own risk profile and to judge each project by their own risk profile. But I've evolved, and I used to think, okay, it's up to that person to seek it out, right? It's up to them to look for it. I used to think that. But my opinion has changed a little bit. I'm still a libertarian, okay? I just want to get that out of the way. Like, I believe people should be able to decide for themselves. But I also believe that people cannot be expected to know what they don't know, right? It's like, we should expect that people will be jumping into this space and using it without knowing what they don't know about it, without understanding what they're using, the same way they do with other types of tech. Sure. Phones, TVs, whatever, plumbing, whatever. But again, the difference here is the finality. Once it's done, it's done. There's no customer service to call and get your money back. So I think that we have to find a way to be proactive in explaining to people what those risks are, and nobody's adequately doing it right now. Nobody. And while it's probably come the farthest as far as trying to explain to people
Still so far though.
certain things. Yeah. And I think that most of these people that we're talking about are not going to be using self-custody. They're going to be coming in through exchanges and interfaces like glossed over front ends, and that may even be offering them some form of service, a layer on top of, the actual blockchain layer. But those are the people who won't understand, who will lose money, who will go crying to government and get the government to come after the people who are responsible and who do want to use it, on their own without that type of oversight. And then the tyranny of the majority is real. Like, we're going to have to cater to the lowest common denominator ultimately. That's the way I think about it. I think that and this is what motivates everything I do, is that the tyranny of the majority is something that's gonna come no matter what. So if the majority is as totally ignorant of how this stuff works, they just want it fast, cheap, and easy. Yep. It's going to centralize, and it's going to be forced to centralize by the regulators. They're like, decentralization, too much of it could become illegal. It could.
No, I mean, even things like security standards, like, that sounds good because it's self-regulating, but that also raises the bar for people entering the space. So it's like, okay, so I basically have to get an angel check to ship anything in DeFi because otherwise I can't afford an audit. That's messed up too. It's a thorny problem, and philosophically, I don't think that there's a satisfactory answer. At least I've never found one in my life. I do think, though, that if we can't find a way to better clean up our act, we're just going to get trampled on.
That's the default.
Yeah.
The default is regulation. Yeah. And historically, it's always been the way it's gone with every industry, right? It's like they ultimately get controlled by regulators. Just look at cars. People wonder, like, why are cars getting so expensive year after year? It's because regulators every single year force new types of technology that you may or may not want in your car. You ever wonder why every car now has a rear backup camera where it didn't before? Do you think that's free? No, you're paying for that. The price of the car goes up with every new thing that they're forced to add in. And it goes on and on. They regulate light bulbs now. They regulate everything. They regulate your TV. They regulate everything. So they're going to regulate this. The question is, what will that regulation look like? And we could do as much lobbying as we want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what kind of lobbying we do as far as preserving our rights. All that matters is what people want, what the majority wants, right? And the majority currently just wants cheap, fast, and safe. That's it.
Which usually,
right?
So I would say you could only pick two of those three things, Like, typically...
cheap, fast, and safe. I think you can have all three.
No, I don't mean you can't anywhere in the world. I just mean, well, is it? I've had funds frozen in PayPal. No, so when I throughout software, that's my favorite, cheap, fast, or quality, and I would say pick two. And it's like a common trilemma that people run into with software costs, but you see it pop up everywhere. And so, yeah, people want it, but one of the ways to get there is through heavy monopolization. Like, if you want something to be cheap, you get really, really, really big, so you can subsidize everything and it'll be really, really, really cheap. So anyway, just a bit of a rabbit hole there, but I don't know if we can have all those things.
I mean, that's what like a layer 2, like Ethereum layer 2.
Yeah, which layer 2? Which layer 2 gives you all three of those things?
All right, hang on. Because what I was saying was the monopoly part. I think that it is the goal of every layer 2 to have a monopoly ultimately. Perhaps. To own the space or own at least a part of the space, and have a specialization of some sort. Cheap, fast, and safe. Okay, which layer 2 offer? Well, I mean, if you're going to say that, a lot of people would say that it's safer to have a 9 of 12 Security Council multi-sig like Arbitrum has, than it is to have a decentralized, sort of irreversible piece of code floating around out there. So it's really, safe has become a controversial sort of term, right, in this space, because people can't agree fully on what. I don't think it's safe to have a multi-sig like that, but a lot of people do. Where do you stand on that as far as the layer 2s
I mean,
go?
the way that I look at
Do you think they're doing everything that they can?
it, do I think they're going? Well, I mean, no. No, not at all. I'm not like, I mean, I'm not going to like go off and rant on any specific one or anything, but I do think that there's some pretty obvious trade-offs that have been made to get to market faster. And I mean, like one of the most obvious ones, right, is optimism with fraud proofs, and then like sort of the pivot to OP stack. And look, as like a business person, I'm like, you need to pivot to where there's a differentiator. You need to go somewhere where people want you to be. But on the other hand, no, I mean, clearly they haven't done everything they could do. They're in the process. So I guess the way that I look at all of this stuff is, I mean, me from going from my first foray into DeFi with tBTC V1 to V2. In V1, we were said everything has to be perfect from the get-go. What we found was that what we thought was perfect in some ways was, and in some other ways wasn't. We didn't have product market fit. We had to move on. And now with V2, we've had to leave all of these shortcuts, training wheels that we're slowly fixing. And I think my issue with that is, do you fix them fast enough? And do you have product market fit so it's even worth fixing? And then finally, do users have any idea? And I mean, I think the answer is probably not. So as far as all twos, do I think they're doing the best they can? I mean, I don't believe there are many people who are like full-time jobbing in this space who are out to fuck user server. Like, I'm sure there are some.
I agree.
Right?
Well, there's some.
I mean, there's like, most of them
yeah.
that have, they have proper jobs and they work at some sort of entity that's got some sort of funding, and they're, I mean, I don't want to like get into the docs for a pseudonym, but maybe at least they've been around long enough that we know who they are. I don't think for the most part they're trying to screw people over, but I think that the incentives are to get something out faster, get something out that's shiny and new, because that's what users want. And then, you don't get awards for being secure. You just end up not on the wrecked leaderboard. And I think we got to figure out how to fix that.
I think the other disconnect, though, is when, and this will pivot us to tBTC a little bit. I think that I get major pushback when I call attention to the fact that a private company, with especially those that are venture backed, with lots of investors, have raised lots of capital and owe a lot back to investors eventually. A private company, corporation like that, cannot be expected to put your liberty, your financial freedom, your rights ahead of their corporate interests. And I believe that is a large driving factor and a reason that a lot of these layer 2s on a lot of DeFi projects, and maybe even tBTC, we can talk about it, has chosen to retain some form of centralized control. Because, especially with the layer 2s, there's a lot of uncertainty still with standing with the government, right? As far as, how's the government going to treat this tech moving forward? If the government comes and says that we're doing something wrong, do we have the ability to fix it, or do we have to shut down our entire company and lose tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in investment? That's the part where it's so obvious, but people don't want to acknowledge it. And it's as far as the Ethereum ecosystem, DeFi, layer 2s, all this stuff goes, it has to be acknowledged, and especially with the lawmaking side, because you've got these organizations out there, these trade organizations like Blockchain Association and DeFi Education Fund, and these guys going to Washington, D.C., lobbying for laws, that directly affect our rights. They're completely funded by these corporations. These corporations' interests are going to come into conflict with ours at some point.
Of course.
and we're going to lose, right? We're going to lose. They're going to trade away our rights for their interests, and we've seen it already. Where
I've seen both sides of that play out for sure.
Okay, so that's what I want to talk about, and then pivot that into tBTC, because you guys have had some interesting stuff going on the past month or two. That we can touch on.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, initially, like, do you think I'm way off on any of this, or is it just common sense?
I think no, I don't think you're way off. I think that it's really easy when you're trying to draw attention to, and actually, I wouldn't even ask you this stuff, by the way. It's really easy when you're trying to draw attention to security issues or issues of trust that a lot of people who are new to the space might not even understand, or they're so used to trust that they might not even understand why. They might be like, oh, no, it's decentralized. And then in the same breath, they'll be like, yeah, like 2 people can make the decision. And they might not even understand like why that's problematic, right? So I think that it's really, if you're sort of like Cassandra, right? And you know the future and you keep telling people the future and they keep ignoring you, you're going to get louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. Unfortunately, in her story, it didn't make a difference how loud she got. She knew the future and no one would believe her, and that was the whole thing. And so I think that if you're trying to draw attention to this stuff, like sort of like a take no prisoners, assume malice attitude makes a lot of sense. The funny thing, though, is, you don't actually need to assume malice when stupidity explains most of it. And or ignorance, or however you want to take that particular phrase.
On whose part?
Well, on a couple. But I would say, for example, most of these companies who will choose their own fate over their users, I think that a lot of them are being asked things like, do you want to? Will you give up your personal freedom to which is very concrete, like maybe you have children, maybe you have family. Will you give up your personal freedom and your personal future prospects for this on-chain address? And I'll tell you, the reason that I'm in this space is so that if I'm ever asked that, my answer is, well, I can't. It doesn't matter if I'm with you and I want to help you or not. I can't. I have, we build things that are neutral, and it's not that I want to remain incredibly neutral. It's that I just do not have, right? And so I think that's when the system works, right? And it's clear to me that regulators understand that about Bitcoin, and they're about there with Ethereum. Almost, proof of stake injects some uncertainty. But so I guess that's one of my statements is I think it's worth calling these companies out, because to both say that you're decentralized, but really to say that you're censorship resistant, and then to have it demonstrated that you're not, means that you either had to lie or you had to be wrong. One of the two, right?
Right.
So yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is I do think people should get a really hard time for that, and I think that they should be held accountable. But I'm also saying that, I don't know many people who would be like, yeah, totally, I'll give up my future for this hex address. And I think that both those things are true. And what we have to do is we have to find a way to make it irrelevant. So
what you're saying is, just to make it exceedingly clear, the example you're giving is, if a developer is approached by a state actor, or somebody running one of these organizations, a company, and actually, I mean, recently with the whole ThorSwap thing that kind of was in that vein. And ThorSwap, for those that don't know, is a front end for ThorChain, which enables cross-chain native swaps. So you can swap Bitcoin to Ethereum without using a centralized exchange. They're just a front end, though. And they're approached by, I don't know if we were told who they were approached by. I don't
Shadowy
think we were.
forces.
But the fact, okay. So, the claim was that the hacker who stole millions from FTX was moving money using the ThorSwap front end. And then ThorSwap put their front end on pause. relaunched it with a government blacklist that blocks sanction addresses, blocks anybody now that the government tells it to block. Yep. And I gave them a very hard time for it, as did others. But they made a clear trade-off, right? So what you just said, if they didn't do that, I think their fear, I don't know if they actually were told this, but I think their fear was that they'd be in trouble, that they would go to jail, that something bad would happen to them or their family.
And to be clear, this is happening at the same time as, Roman and the Tornado Cash guys are just getting wrecked. So even though they might not have been told that, there's reason for them to believe that, right? There's an object.
There's a lot going on. Yes. It was done out of fear.
Yep.
Right. I mean, I think that, but it was also done out of self-preservation, and I think that self-preservation should be expected from everyone. We're all built to preserve ourselves and to protect our families. And like what you were just saying, like protect your family, and you protect your family by preserving your wealth, by not going to jail, by not, being let off in cuffs forever and never to be heard from again. So I think, and this is that adversarial point of view that Bitcoin was built for, right? The idea that every human being on this planet, if they're faced with the choice of self-preservation or basically destruction, they're going to choose self-preservation if they can, if they have the ability to do it. And I think, I'm not trying to malign the character of anybody here, but I like these guys. But I think that if the developers of Tornado Cash had a way at the point where they were faced with, go to jail or do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, they would have done X, Y, Z.
They would have done X, Y, Z. But they didn't have that option because they couldn't. So now, if they had a choice, would they go back and build it in? Probably.
I mean,
but the reason
is complicated enough, right? That it's like it's hard to generalize because there's so much that's new about what's going on with Tornado Cash.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I guess where I'm at is, I think that the reason people leave Control is either what you said earlier, where some people believe a 9 to 12 is safer. So I think there are some people who believe that. I've worked with some
lawyers.
Well, yeah, definitely plenty of lawyers. But I've worked with engineers who, and like empirically, there's a lot of reason to believe that's true. Like, why are you the one who can build the thing that doesn't need that?
Yeah, it's safer.
Yeah, so I get
it. It's safer from bugs.
Yes.
Yeah. Not from human integrity,
Correct.
not from self-preservation, but from bugs.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that there's that, but then there's also like I mean, you've got to find a way for your power to expire. Your power. Maybe it's not a single developer, maybe it's a bunch of the community. And then maybe you just give it all to the DAO, and it's like, okay, do we really want a majority of token holders to be able to do this too? So I mean, I think the mistake that we've made on tBTC is we've done two things with V2 wrong that I would fix if I could snap my fingers and go back. Well, let me see. Let me be very specific with my words. I think the two things that I would have done better, the V2 release, is one, just a better explanation of the system. Still, it's quite difficult. People have to look at blog posts, and no one wants to look at blog posts. Some part of me thinks it doesn't matter where I write it. People don't give a shit. But, but I think one is,
that's a problem.
Right? It's a real problem. But one is like,
it's fast.
It's true, yeah. But it's like, if I invest $200,000 in like, animated YouTube videos, then will they understand? Like, what level of investment and education do you need to make before people understand how the system works? So I think that's one that I would do more than we have done. But then the other is a timeline for the expiry of those multi-sig powers. And I think that's something that I put forward a thought that the community is turning into a proposal for us right now. Is like, how can we, what's cool about Bitcoin? Well, part of what's cool is that there's a fixed emission schedule that isn't going to change. And how can we get that sort of like programmatic assurance with some of the issues we're talking about now? At what point is the Security Council moot? At what point are we confident enough that there hasn't been a bug that, everyone's just sort of gets locked out? And it's just like users running this thing. So I think, you know, that's really one of the things I'm trying to fix right now with V2 is, okay, when? How long? 12 months? Do you need 12 months without incident to be confident? 18 months? How long before all these things can sort of fall away?
And you're talking about make it irreversible, put it into the code?
Yeah. I mean, again, V1 was a completely immutable code base. And so this is like a question of when does code get finished, but it's also a question of like, when do we not need the ability to pause this subcomponent? And I mean, the answer, if you're saying this is a temporary power that we're going to include in the system for safety, well then it should make sense that you can choose some amount of time after which the power expires, right?
I like the motivation. I like where you're coming from on it, and but I'm wondering if it's addressing the wrong issue. You know, in that you know, I don't think the fact that the multi-sigs exist is inherently bad. I think that the fact that people don't understand the risks that they pose is bad. You know, so
I just don't know how to fix that part.
I think that, that's what I mean. So that's what I'm wondering, like, is an automatic expiry of your centralized control, I don't know if that's addressing that problem as much as, I mean, it could be interesting from an organizational point of view. Like, it almost forces you to work faster and forces you to get a lot done by X date. I love that part. I'm not sure, and I mean, maybe we'd see more projects with more decentralization in a year or two if we did that. But the projects that are currently, like Arbitrum, for instance, not to pick on them, but I mean, they're one of the ones. They're not going to do that. You know, like their lawyers would never let them do that. So it's I'm not sure. It's an interesting idea. I'd love to see it tried.
I'll just say, you know, without talking about any of my own conversations with my lawyers or anything, I don't know that I have met a lawyer who has said, oh, this button that you have that does something in the system, like it expiring, is unacceptable. I don't know that I've ever met someone like that. Now, what I have heard is if you host this front end, I hear a lot of that. And I've heard a lot of thoughts on just like, oh, of course you need to include monitoring, just like as a blanket statement. And I'm not, you know, not to harsh on any particular lawyers or anything, but I guess I wonder, at some point you actually have to give your thing over to the community.
You don't have to, but you should.
I think it's a good idea. Like, I think, you know, if you want to avoid a lot of these issues, like if this stuff is just software and you're not the one delivering it day to day, and you don't have some privileged role where you're the only one who can update it, you know, eventually I don't understand how you could possibly be squeezed. Like, how Satoshi can't be squeezed for what Bitcoin does. And you know what?
No.
Vitalik?
But he could be thrown in jail.
He could be thrown in jail, but it's a stretch at this point today. Like, it's not, if he launched the next Bitcoin tomorrow, there's some period of time where he could definitely get in a lot of trouble for it. But after some amount of time, right, and some amount of understanding. And I mean, the fact that we haven't seen, I'm sure Vitalik has had his like plenty of lawyer calls, but the fact that we haven't really seen him get publicly threatened, I think is quite interesting. Anyway, I don't know. I guess I'm still an optimist about the space. And for me, that means there has to be a way for us to build immutable censorship resistant systems. And, you know, there was progressive decentralization, was this idea. And we've seen that most people don't have the stones or the follow through to actually do the second part. They like the progressive part.
Right. It's hard, man. Hard. I can't even imagine. Like, I say it over and over, like deploying immutable code on Ethereum that you know is going to get promoted and used heavily. Like, I want to be there the moment that next time you deploy code. I want to like live stream that.
No,
and I want to see that. And I want to see you sweating.
Yeah. I would say you live stream it with like a 3-hour delay or something. Because like, like the number of times where people do it and then they have to pull something back, or I mean, it's a lot. And there aren't that many teams who have done it more than once.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, before we run out of time, I want to talk about tBTC a little bit. So it's been, and now we're on tBTC V2. Yep. And for those who don't know what tBTC is, it's a tokenized form of Bitcoin on Ethereum. You can use the tBTC bridge, which locks your Bitcoin in a Bitcoin wallet on the Bitcoin blockchain, and then mints a tBTC token on the Ethereum blockchain, which you can then do whatever you want on Ethereum with. You can swap it for something else. You could use tBTC for collateral, et cetera, et cetera. So that mechanism, that's a very simple way of explaining the bridge, right? And it goes back now the other way too. So you can burn a tBTC token on Ethereum and receive BTC on the Bitcoin blockchain. So so we can talk about for a minute the bugs.
Let's talk about it, of course.
Okay. So I can give you my understanding, and it's also related to the FTX hacker, and it was all around the same time as the ThorSwap thing. And Matt wrote a very open, honest, probably saying about 98% of what he could say in a blog post from October 7th called "The Tale of Two Bugs," which is on the blog.threshold.network.
Yep.
You can I'll link to it in the show notes. But basically, what I gathered from this was the FTX hacker, in quotes, definitely not SBF hacker. And like, who knows? That's been the speculation.
Yeah, I love that, but it seems
I'm just kidding. But whoever it is that had all that money was trying to burn tBTC tokens for Bitcoin. Yep. Was trying to use the tBTC bridge to move,
and they succeeded
into the Bitcoin blockchain.
Partially. Yeah.
Okay. So at the exact moment that they were trying to use that bridge, somebody out there in the world, and I don't know, Matt, if you have any more information on what's in the blog post, but somebody out there in the world started to send Bitcoin transactions to the wallets that hold the Bitcoin, I believe, on the Bitcoin blockchain. And actually, effectively, it was like a denial of service in a way, right? Like they clogged it up so that the bridge couldn't operate. At the exact time that the FTX hacker was trying to use the bridge. So it almost seems like somebody was trying to stop the FTX hacker from using the bridge.
I really struggle to see it any other way. The timing is too... it doesn't make sense to me. Like, this has never happened to us before. We've had other redemptions. So yeah, I mean, no, what you said is accurate. But I mean, on the one hand, it's like, oh, I don't want to speculate on some random on-chain thing, but it's very difficult for me as a human who has been evolved to see patterns, to think that these two things happening together was a coincidence. And I don't know who did it. I didn't do it. I'm happy to share that. What a huge pain in the ass it's been. But also, like, I'm sort of impressed by whoever did it, right? Because the way that it went down, they would have had to very quickly pull out a 0 day on the tBTC bridge. And it's not like a show-stopping bug. I mean, it's a showstopper in the sense that there's a denial of service and the bridge is paused. But it's not like, a real baddie where we would freak out or anything. That said, I mean, obviously we noticed what was going on. All hands were on deck. All of our monitoring systems went off. And then we got into the most uncomfortable position we could possibly be in, which is now we have a bunch of redemption requests that are queued up from the FTX exploiter, and our bridge is paused. So obviously we need to get the bridge unpaused, and we need to get the bridge fixed. And this is the part where I talk about training wheels and taking them off at the right time. So, so here's the way tBTC worked, and I hope it won't work this way shortly, is we have a contract called the wallet coordinator. And what the wallet coordinator does is, it's going to sound simple, but it's also very obvious what the problem is once I say it. Here's what a wallet coordinator does. So Bitcoin uses UTXOs, and as anyone who's done any like dev against Bitcoin, especially if they worked on an exchange or something that kind of looks similar to what tBTC looks like, is the most difficult part is UTXO management. So when do you merge UTXOs? When are you confident that you've received funds? When do you need to sweep them, right? Which is when basically you merge a whole bunch of UTXOs into one wallet. So the way that tBTC does all this stuff is it can't do all of it on chain and Solidity. It's very expensive. If someone were to open, 3,000 deposits simultaneously, and all of this were managed on chain, no swoops would happen. No UTXO management would happen. But you also need all of your stakers to agree on what they're going to do. So this is actually a really interesting comparison with ThorChain. So if we have 51 of 100 stakers that are required to move Bitcoin, that means 51 of 100 of those have to do something to manage UTXOs, which means they have to agree on what they're doing to manage UTXOs. So if you're ThorChain, what you've done here is you've built an entire chain, and its consensus mechanism is managing these UTXOs. I mean, they do other stuff in there too, but that's like a lot of it. And that stuff is way too expensive gas-wise for Solidity. We don't have our own chain. We have to do whatever the EVM will let us. So what we said was, okay, we're going to start with this wallet coordinator contract. And the wallet coordinator can have multiple people who can run it off-chain, multiple keys. And what the wallet coordinator will do is it will suggest sweeps, and then it will suggest redemptions. So it will suggest actual Bitcoin withdrawals from the wallets. And then the hope was that we would do this for a while, then we would add some more people to this contract, and then, I should say one more thing. Just because something's been added to the wallet coordinator doesn't mean stakers will do it. So if someone were to add, like, redeem 2,000 BTC to this address, stakers can just completely ignore it and are programmed. Anyway, so we do all this, and then here's our fatal flaw. I feel like such a I won't curse too much on this. I feel like quite a few would be the PG way to say. So we deployed, and we only had one wallet coordinator address. That was us. And by us, I mean Keep Ltd, the Cayman subsidiary of the Delaware C Corp that is Thesis Inc. We're the only ones running a coordinator. Does that sound like a single point of failure? Oh, no, I knew it. Of course I knew it. But how did we not add anyone else? That's I think what I'm the most upset about here is like, yeah, I know, I knew it worked this way, but where was the plan to add 2 more, 3 more? And the DAO can still do this at any moment. Like, it doesn't need my permission to add more, just like it doesn't need my permission to remove Keep Ltd.
So it wasn't by design. It wasn't a point, an intentional choke point.
No. It should allow as many as the DAO wants to add. And it can. Again, still.
But the DAO has to add. But the DAO
has to add it. And so now we're in this position where it's like, okay, there was a bug. We have to fix the bug. I can either choose, like Matt Luongo in the US, can choose to suggest, like, basically go into the wallet coordinator and push these redemptions. Or we can leave it. So what happens if we leave it? What happens if we do nothing? What happens if we do nothing, and the way the system runs today, is that there's a 40-day, I want to say 42, I don't know, it's a funny name. There's a 40-day period where after that, if the redemption hasn't gone through, there's a slashing of it. And then the tBTC goes back to the redeemer. And the idea behind that design was pretty straightforward. Like, if you went to redeem and no one redeemed you, you should get your money back. And obviously, like, you have been hurt because, like, you wanted Bitcoin, you get it, but at least you got your tBTC back. So that's what we're in right now. We're in this period. So what we want to do is we want to get the bridge to a valid state. So the first thing we did is we said, okay, let's make that slashing period longer and make sure people don't lose their money over this. And then the second thing we did was we said, please, DAO. Well, I say first and second. I don't know if it actually went in this order. These happen close together. But we said, DAO, please give us more wallet coordinators. And then at this point, who wants to be a wallet coordinator in a system like this that I've just described? So that's where we're at right now.
Right.
So
can I just make sure I have this right before you go on? So just to relate it back to the FTX hacker guy. So his transactions were basically queued up because of
On-chain,
the little denial of on-chain, because of the denial of service sort of 0 day that some mysterious party executed.
White hat, gray hat, or
And-
black hat, depending on your perspective. Yeah.
Okay, so then because they were denied, they ended up like kind of in this queue. The bridge was basically just stopped for a
all
while, right?
redemptions.
Because nobody could get anything
Correct.
through. So because they were sitting there, it gave time for the wallet coordinator, which turns out is just your company.
You got it.
Which is responsible for approving every redemption back to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So, and which is
probably wouldn't use the word approve, but it's responsible for
what do
putting.
you call it?
Yeah, this is the part where I have to look at contracts.
Redeem.
It's responsible for. So here's why I say don't use, or why I don't mean approve. So what it doesn't do is it doesn't go through each redemption request and say this is good. That would be pretty dumb. What it does instead is it batches redemption requests as part of UTXO management. Now, in effect, it's almost the same thing. If you only have a single redemption going through it over time, again, this is something I feel quite dumb about. So it looks like an approval, but really it's choosing which UTXOs to batch into a redemption. Sorry, continue.
Okay, but the fact of the matter is, at any point in time, it could have chosen to implement a blacklist or censor somebody, or because of the fact that it's one party. Sure. But even if it was 5 parties or 10 parties, it could still happen and could still happen. Yeah. So, but the fact of the matter is that the denial of service thing gave the wallet coordinator sort of there was no longer like this plausible deniability where the transaction could just go through and just happen, because now everybody knows that this is a criminal, air quotes. We don't know who it is. Yeah. And that this, that it's the government wants it stopped. We can assume that because it's on some sort of list somewhere, right? So, which is the reason ThorSwap did what it did. So, you felt compelled, to
as a U.S.
stop
person,
it from happening.
Yes, I feel very compelled to not sign that from a U.S.
because of self-preservation. You don't want to. Now, okay. So, how did that thought process go? I don't want to assume anything.
It went like this. That's an FTX exporter address using our bridge. Okay. Oh, wow. ThorSwap is getting it used a lot. Ooh, okay. What just happened to our bridge and why is it lost? That's how that went. And at this point, we went from, the bridge is going to work as intended to, we were just demonstrated a terrible single point of failure in our system. And it's funny, not in the system design, but in the system parameters, right? So this isn't something that showed up on an audit. This isn't, and obviously in hindsight, feels incredibly obvious.
Well, because it's so obvious. How is it?
Well, I mean, there are 30
you didn't
more things
know
like
that this could.
So, think about how the Miners and Guardians work. Think about, I didn't think.
Like, I aligned a lot of that in my blog post on tBTC.
I didn't think a lot, but this isn't that. I didn't think a lot of. I didn't think that someone would pull a 0 day out, and pause redemptions in our bridge, and then I would ever be put in a position where I had enough time to question whether or not. Okay. Yeah, I mean, no, I didn't think that would happen. That was pretty extraordinary.
So the wallet coordinator shouldn't really have mattered.
No.
Because there should not have been enough time. Because how long, before the 0 day, it's instant, pretty much. Transaction.
Depending on how the price of Bitcoin, it's between 15 minutes and an hour. That's it, and then it just does.
Okay.
It's not we don't have everyone wake up in the middle of the night because the bridge has gotten paused typically when this is going on. So moving forward, right? Here's where I'm at. That's a fucked up mechanism design, and we can't keep using that, right? So clearly, the fact that it looks, it's not quite an approval process, but it's close enough from a security and centralization perspective. So what I'm pushing for or really what I've stated, and I hope that the DAO pushes for, is I want to move to a veto, or really an objection mechanism. So everything by default goes through. Part of this is going to be very difficult on chain, because we have to make sure that people can't just say, give me 1,000 BTC on chain, and that anyone can submit that. So this is kind of the hard part, is we're going to have to find a way to programmatically be confident that anything people request is valid in the first place. So that'll be step one. And then step two is, let's have a bunch of...
But when you say valid, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I mean valid,
when you say
like
valid,
not a hack of the tBTC bridge.
Okay, you don't mean illicit or illegal. You
I'm
mean
not, like, this is
okay.
This is a piece of infrastructure that shouldn't have thoughts on people's private lives. It's just supposed to like do its job. So no. When I say valid, what I mean is you put tBTC in, and this is the hard one. This is the part that's actually hard to do on chain. You specified the correct wallets, the correct UTXOs, and you gave us the correct script and the correct Bitcoin transaction, so that this redemption can happen safely. So like that means that you didn't ask us to spend 1,000 BTC in miners fees. That means you didn't combine the right UTXOs. It seems simple, but honestly, it's the first bug we had in tBTC 1 was around this stuff. It's hard code to write. So my hope is, and what I've outlined is this idea called optimistic redemptions, where we tighten that code up so much so that you can't submit a redemption request that isn't already, and it's pretty close. I think it's close there now, but it deserves a little more scrutiny. You can't submit a redemption request that is not already a valid state transition. So now there's no longer a need for a wallet coordinator. And then what we do instead is we say, okay, if we miss something, there can be a bunch of people who can like veto, but veto is really a terrible word, object, I'll say, to a particular redemption. And the idea is that we still want the ability to say, oh, fuck, there's a bug. But we don't want that forever. We also don't want that to be unilateral. So my thought is that you have 5, 7, 11 of these. Each time someone objects, a particular redemption can get delayed longer and longer and longer. Eventually, it's just returned back to the redeemer in tBTC if enough people have said, no, I object. And then that power should expire within 18 months is the time that I'm outlining. So that's what I'm suggesting we move to. And what I like about that is, if there's a hack, you can make sure there are people who are monitored constantly and who can object. If there's, the next FTX exploiter, well, maybe every we'll probably call this our veto or guardian or whatever. Maybe they all are like, no, fuck you, and they try to bounce the thing out, and it delays the time a little bit. Or maybe a couple of them are like, no, it's none of our business, and it gets delayed a little bit and it goes through. And finally, we just take the training wheels off at the end of the period. And I think that's the thing that's the biggest issue here is, we came up with this design originally because it was so hard to write this code safely. Now we've been bit in the ass. It's a huge flaw. Like, the fact that the wallet coordinator worked this way, in my view, is a huge flaw in tBTC. Just like as a system designer, it's not a huge flaw for users, like funds are safe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I'm quite unhappy. And then, I think we just need the training list to come off, and it all needs to happen on chain. And it's just going to take a long time to get it there.
So I just want to make sure I understand.
Sure.
So in this new system, you wouldn't need the wallet coordinator because everything is cryptographically proven to be valid.
Yeah, there's like a lot of asterisks after that. You'll need something that looks kind of like it, but you won't need a single party submitting anything to the wallet coordinator.
Okay. So assuming that, we'll just abstract that away a little bit and just assume that that's true. The what were you calling the new parties? That would be vetoes.
What are we calling? Guardians, vetoers.
Okay.
Or something.
Okay. So the sole purpose of the vetoers in that new scenario is to censor if
there's
deemed
a hack
necessary.
Yeah. So
not just if there's a hack.
Well, no. Sorry.
For any reason.
Let me be clear.
Yeah.
Whoever has that key can do whatever the hell they want. So we talk a lot about what people should do or what they will do or whatever. So let's put our luck hat on all the way. No, people can censor whatever the hell they want if they're in one of those things. But the censorship is just a time delay, right? So it allows these people to stack the time delay. So if there's a hack, coordinate everyone, stack the time delay. That gives us time to respond, figure out what's going on, et cetera. Ultimately, eventually, the transaction gets kicked back out and people get their tBTC back. That's the deal. And then I want to make that expiring.
Okay.
And the reason, again, is the same. I mean, it's the same as the discussion we had about Arbitrum versus completely decentralized systems. Is like, yeah, I'm afraid. Like, in the same way that I don't want to see this bridge have a bunch of money disappear. And it is very difficult to balance what we believe is a more secure design and censorship resistance. And we've got caught right in the middle of it. So, yeah, so that's my goal.
Right.
And then it will really depend. It's really about are these people awake? What is their ideological lean? Are they near a signer? All of the other questions that you would expect around how people make decisions.
Okay. It's just important to recognize as we're talking about this, that this new mechanism is set up very specifically for compliance. It's set up in a way to meet the needs of. It's built to the government's speculation.
I think you've got it a little back. I think you've got a little backwards. The system we've got right now is, unfortunately, much easier for government. It's much easier for anyone who wants to express.
Well, the way it worked with the wallet coordinator, the fact that you could.
So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for an expiring alternative to what we have right now that will still allow us to stop a redemption if there is a bug that leads the whole thing going to zero. That is what I'm looking for. And if you want to look at that as that's made for the government, okay. I'm very interested in an alternative system design that gives us the one thing and not the other thing. So if you have that, I'm interested.
But the vetoers are there to stop also illicit transactions.
They are there to stop.
Right? Like a hack.
No. For when I say a hack, I'm specifically talking about the tBTC bridge. My version of this, if I were to magically get everyone to do what I wanted, what I would like is people only block actual tBTC bridge hacks. But that's really going to depend on the vetoes.
But in this scenario with the FTX hacker, they would have vetoed.
I don't know.
The FTX?
I don't know. These are imaginary people.
Well, they would have, because they would have gone to jail if they didn't, probably, because they're on the hook.
So
I mean, we got to assume the worst.
I mean, so this is the part where it's not.
Maybe we shouldn't go there. I don't know.
Speculate. I don't know.
And we're almost out of time anyway.
Yeah. So I think with this new mechanism in this situation, I'm not sure. What I do know is that the whole the bug that led to the bridge pausing has been fixed. What I do know is that there wouldn't be a single U.S. company making this decision. So those are things that I know about this new mechanism. So those are two flaws that I want us to fix. And I do know that with this new mechanism, we can give it a time limit, and after that, it goes away. And I think that, and that can be hard-coded. So I think that's how I'm balancing this in my head. Because look, if the whole thing goes to zero, that is worse. That is worse than someone getting a redemption return, and erroneously, perhaps.
Yes. Of course.
So yeah, so that's how I'm looking at this whole thing, and that's the balance. Maybe it should be 6 months. Maybe it should be 12. I don't know.
Yeah.
The other thing that we're doing is, or that I'm suggesting, I don't have no idea what people are going to do. So I'm suggesting that the time delay goes down over time. So it starts with you've gotten like an hour, and then it slowly goes down to, okay, there's only a 15-minute delay where these people can veto. And my hope is that means like your moderator better be really good, you know. But that's the best I've got. I don't know if there's a perfect answer here. If we take off everything right now,
there's not.
Right? Yeah.
No, the one thing I get from you is you're doing the best you can with what you're dealing with, and it's like I hear you, but again, it goes back to the problem. The root of the problem is that you can make these changes, right? And you can try to find ways to preserve yourself and your company, which it's your...
In this case, the change I can make, let's be really clear, is not signing a transaction that helps the FTX exploiter. That's the change that I can make. Right. Like hard power, just my company can make that change. These code changes, we can't make alone. This requires either the council or the entire DAO to vote on any of these things. So, thankfully.
Man, I appreciate you taking the time today. It's been a really great chat. I think it's going to be valuable for a lot of people.
Hey, you got it.
Anybody who doesn't know about tBTC, I encourage you to go check it out. Read the blog on threshold.network. It's very good. Matt writes a lot of good stuff there. And hey, man, thank you so much. We should do this again sometime because these conversations are too rare.
Got it.
In this space.